2 days ago, some residents of Oyigbo West and Boa communities in Rivers State were also sacked by flood that submerged some low houses, while modern ones were swept away. They said water from Imo River overflowed and flooded their homes during a downpour. These are coming as predicted by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency and the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, that Nigeria will experience severe flooding this year.
Well, 178 local government areas in 32 states and the FCT have been identified as prone to severe flooding. Well, according to the assessment, the states facing a high threat of flooding in the country's south are Abia, Akwa Ibom, Anambra, Bayelsa, Benue, Cross River, Delta, Ebonyi, Ekiti, Edo, Imo, Ogun, Ondo, Osun, Oyo, and River State. I mean, it's a long list. Well, in the north, the at-risk states are Adamawa, Bauchi, Gombe, Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Kebbi, Kogi, Kwara, Lagos, Nasarawa, Niger, Sokoto, and the FCT. Of course, Lagos is not part of the north, just to, underscore that. Well, for some residents of the Trade Mall estate in Abuja, there is a growing controversy over the legality or otherwise of these structures. Also of concern are the possible assistance that can be rendered to victims of the flooding. Let's bring in Arise analyst Frank Tietie to look at some of the issues. Frank, good to have you on Newsnight tonight.
Thank you for coming.
Well, I'm sure, you listened to some of the respondents there, the victims, those are the receiving end of this unfortunate flooding in the Trademore area of Abuja here. Who really is to blame for these illegal structures on waterways? Who should be doing their due diligence before any attempt to buy property or to even build?
Government, start to finish of this matter, is government. Government, they say it's a continuum, but if there have been derelictions of duty by previous government officials, the present government must accept responsibility and do the proper thing. In this case, there is some measure of contributory violation by the government itself, by government officials. But I think this blame game is a way of taking attention away from the responsibility of government to provide adequate shelter. It's a constitutional responsibility. Actually, it's a directive of the Constitution that government must, provide adequate shelter. The provision is section 16, subsection 6 of the Constitution, provides the mandatory, responsibility of government to ensure that they direct state resources to provide adequate shelter for Nigerians. Unfortunately, that preceding section 16 is section 6, subsection 6C of the Constitution, that says if government fails in its responsibilities with regards to the directive the Constitution has given, nobody can challenge government. So that is one of the reasons why there is an entrenched irresponsibility on the part of those who are supposed to provide services.
In other words, it's not actionable in court. You cannot go to court to challenge.
So why would the Constitution give a directive that is not meant to be enforced? The idea is that any person in government is not supposed to be told what to do. That's the principal responsibility. There's been so much talk about the flood, and we see not necessarily a blame game, but this always lazy approach by government. We saw the director of NEMA the other day blaming the citizens that they actually blocked the water channels they built on flood plains. What is NEMA supposed to do as an emergency response agency, if not to respond to bring solutions with a sense of emergency? What stopped them, if they knew that the trade mall was on a flood path, from ensuring that those channels were cleared? They've always given the impression that citizens should run their own government. If citizens can run a government in their own estate, then why do they need people to run a formal government in Nigeria?
So why do they need people to run a formal government in Nigeria? Well, the former government was there a few days ago. That's the director saying that they were on the wrong spot on the water channel And then just yesterday, the chairman of the Resident Association came here saying that, well, even if they were on water channel, being an engineer, he has the knowledge and understanding that there's something that can be done about it. So where do they go from here?
See, you know, the way of least resistance is often adopted by government officials. By the way, the provision on the Constitution regarding the directive on the provision of housing for all citizens is actually Section 16, subsection 2, not subsection 6. By the way, if you now look at the responsibility of government to provide housing, and it has failed woefully in providing even an enabling environment for citizens to own houses. Now, citizens have now sweated to build their own houses or borrowed money, in this case, either funded through the National Housing Fund, but through the Federal Mortgage Bank, to buy houses. You have been unable to provide houses, and they've provided houses for themselves. Now, the first thing you should do when those houses are threatened by one natural occurrence or the other is to salvage the situation. But the usual way of least resistance being adopted across Nigeria, we've seen it in it's demolition. Oh, demolish it. They have been built on it's Amak land. What is the meaning of that? Amak is not a government under the Constitution of Nigeria. We're talking so we're talking about countries that have been able to tear up parts in the desert to open up water canals for ships to pass. And there is a government in the Federal Capital Territory that wants to blame the citizens for blocking water channels and then for building on floodplains for how many years? For the past 20 years, when there is so much negligence on the part of those who should have even prevented it, but not only allowed it, facilitated it, and that they turn around to blame those citizens. That is the height of irresponsibility. Government, the culture of service in our country has always been that of shiking responsibility, that of always pushing it back to the people, as if the people own government. Of course, the people who have government to serve them. Let me be honest with you. For those persons who do not know that there are several ideas that are better than demolition, one of which is that, look, why don't you set up, look, we've seen a whole lake created somewhere in Jabi, artificial lake created to collect water. We've seen it. When I was in law school nearly 20 years ago, we've seen pipes, channeling water far away from Kaduna, we were told, when Usman Dam was being constructed. But in this case, because it has to do with citizens, their houses, it doesn't concern these big boys, directors, and the rest of them, who can always pass the buck, they say, go and demolish it. Look, if President Tinubu is on the path of sacking and replacing people, the people working in the National Emergency Management Agency should be the first person to issue sack and replace. Because it's a national embarrassment. In Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory of Africa's most populous country, Africa's supposedly richest country, you find a flood in an estate, and then the contemplation is that you want to go and demolish it. You don't have ideas of how to rechannel water. Even if it's a river, the fact is that you have to first of all protect people's interests. Houses you couldn't provide for your citizens. Citizens provided for themselves. You are contemplating demolition. Something must be wrong with us in the way we carry out our service culture in this country.
At this point, look, the damage has been done, right? People have built along channels that they had no business building on.
Recreate new channels. Recreate new channels away from it. Look, what we are saying.
Once the problem persists, what should we be talking about now? Now that the damage has been done, should we be discussing compensation for these people to move them away from those areas that they really
you saw the cold-hearted manner which that director in NEMA spoke about the issue of compensation, blaming them. They say, the government does not owe them anything. What are you talking about? These are your citizens. See, we are not even talking about compensation. Why the flood? Let me tell you a pattern of a responsible government. When the flood was going on, first they should have preempted it, knowing because the NEMA had given NIMET had given several warnings as to flood-prone areas.
Yes.
First, and then this thing is often reoccurs. Then you should be able to reasonably contemplate that such a thing will happen, that there will be block channels, go and open them. And even when it was happening, we should see NEMA officials in the rain, whatever it is, clearing those channels so that the water can pass. Because I recall.
How about heads rolling in the allocating agencies? Isn't that where it should start from, so that you can prevent this kind of situation in future?
Let us go there to see. Understandably, there is a school, there is an area of law referred to as
criminal negligence.
Right.
For those persons whose negligence in terms of supervision has caused a lot of damage and to a large extent loss of life, some of them should go to prison. There's no doubt about that. But because we run a system that is largely, built on impunity, nobody is being held to account. That's a different matter. But I'm concerned with the idea of blaming Nigerians for what? Even if they built on the river, the fact is that the Nigerians go and drain that river if it is possible. Create another channel. We have not seen it. I have not seen water channels created, canals created. So why should the first contemplation be that you want to go and demolish buildings? So you talk about compensation.
Right.
The idea is this: a government at this time there should be a Marshall Plan, immediate one. First, rechannel the water, whatever it will take, rechannel the water, and then go and begin to build new set of buildings, whether it will take 20 years or whatever, for the purpose of relocation, before you can contemplate taking the people away from there. But you see, it is basic lack of ideas, lack of innovation, lazy approach to public service. That's why people don't ever sit down to contemplate, turning natural disasters to blessings. That situation in Trade Mall can actually be arrested and actually redirected for the purpose of saving the situation rather than contemplating ever. Instead of talking about how to bring succor to the people, the only thing we talk about when in terms of emergency is to go and bring a bag of rice and noodles for Nigerians. Whereas you are supposed to think up solutions with a sense of emergency, construct bridges, build canals, and channel the water away from that place.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your passion and your insights have been acknowledged on Newsnight. Frank.